Nolan is a new physical damage assassin hero, and in this video, I'll be covering everything you need to know to master him, including his combos, builds, and tricks to use him. Let's start with how he actually works. The main chunk of his kit comes from his passive, which I will split into 3 sections so you can understand more clearly. The first part of his passive is that he can create rifts whenever he uses his skills. These rifts will stay on the ground for 5 seconds and slow enemies that comes in contact with it. The second part is that whenever you create 2 or more rifts that come into contact with each other, it will cause a rift explosion after a short delay. The explosion will slightly pull enemies to its center, kind of like how Fovia's skill 2 works, and also deal a good amount of damage. If the explosion hits an enemy hero or jungle creep, you will automatically be refunded 15 energy. The third part of his passive enhances your next basic attack. The enhanced basic attack will allow him to dash towards a target, dealing damage and creating a rift. This effect has a 6 seconds cooldown after it is used, but the cooldown will restart if you hit enemy heroes or minions. Nolan's skill 1 is pretty simple. He will slash an area in front of him, dealing a solid amount of AoE damage and creating a rift. His skill 2 makes him dash towards a target direction, dealing AoE damage to any enemies in the path and also creating a rift. Now, his ultimate is pretty strong. He will slash 3 times in the target area, dealing significant AoE damage, dashing backwards and leaving 3 rifts. The rifts will then explode because of his passive, dealing further AoE damage in that area. In addition to that, his ultimate also has a purify effect, which allows you to break away from crowd control effects, similar to Kagura's and 1-1 skill 2. My suggested skill leveling priority will be to take skill 1 at level 1, then prioritize ultimate and skill 1 whenever they are available. The ultimate has the highest priority since it does the most damage, followed by skill 1, which also contributes to a significant amount of your damage. Skill 2 has really low base damage and multipliers, so it is of least importance. I think Nolan's best role is in the jungle. I have tried Nolan in a regular lane, and it really isn't an enjoyable experience. The problem with playing him in lane is really down to his lack of sustain and energy issues. Nolan doesn't have any inbuilt regen options and he's pretty squishy, so laning is really suboptimal for him. His skills consume a lot of energy, and he cannot activate the refund when the rift explodes on lane minions. Jungling allows Nolan access to the purple buff, which helps a lot with his energy hungry kit. He can also more effectively snowball in this role, which is great since he can do really massive damage when he has enough farm. His inbuilt access to Purify also gives him a slight edge in objective contest, since it would be difficult to lock him down. Also, you can use the ult to combo with Retribution to secure objectives, since the ult does have a solid amount of immediate burst damage. I will recommend the penetration build on Nolan. I have tested this build and it is the most efficient one for damage. The emblem used will be the Assassin emblem with Rupture, Wilderness Blessing and Killing Spree. This gives us 21 flat penetration at baseline, which is really strong especially in the early to mid phases. Nolan has solid jungle clear, especially with a damage build, so Season Hunter is unnecessary in my opinion. So I opted for Wilderness Blessing in this case for faster rotations. I think Festival of Blood doesn't really offer much sustain for Nolan, and he has good enough damage, so Weapons Master is unnecessary. I chose Killing Spree for the regen and movement speed boost to chain kills. Otherwise, Lethal Ignition or Impure Rage are also fine on him. For items, we start with tier 1 boots and build into Blade of Heptasis. The passive of Heptasis synergizes well with his enhanced basic attack passive and makes it his best first item. We complete tier 2 boots at this point, which I recommend going for either warrior or tough boots, depending on what's needed. We then go for Hunter Strike and then Malefic Roar as the second and third item. I know some of you guys may argue for Blade of Despair as the third item, but I have actually done the testing and Malefic Roar is still the stronger option despite being 1000 gold cheaper. However, Blade of Despair is actually the best fourth item, so you can finally go for it after Malefic Roar. I will finish off the build with Immortality, or you can go for Athena's Shield if you keep getting bursted by magic damage.
I won't tolerate ignorance. Fracture. Coordinates set. Oblivion. Escape.
The most basic combo which I use most of the time is skill 1 into skill 2. I prefer this over skill 2 into skill 1 as this combo has a higher chance to guarantee a Rift explosion. By the way, you can see his energy bar below his HP is separated into 4 sections. Each section represents how much energy he uses to cast either his skill 1 or skill 2. When we have the purple buff, you can see that the bar extends to 5.5 sections instead, since the purple buff reduces the energy cost of his skills. Also, his ultimate does not have energy costs, so you can use it even if you do not have any energy. You can use skill 2 as a gap closing tool, then use the enhanced basic attack to dash and create a rift. Then chain in skill 1 for another rift which will cause a rift explosion.
Experience the void. Without my little star to guide me, I would have been lost long ago.
Since Nolan's ultimate has a very low cooldown, you can safely use it on jungle creeps to clear them faster if a fight is not going to happen soon.
I can navigate the stars with ease. Time for action.
Remember to always keep an eye on the map to see the situation of any ongoing fights to gauge whether you should join.
Is this hopeless wish all I have left to cling to?
I am actually going into the side bush to set up a potential surprise ambush on Leslie, but since Derov seems like he's coming to engage on my teammates, I will position myself for a counter engage instead. If you are positioned for an ambush, I like to start with enhanced basic attack to close the gap on the enemy, and immediately cast skill 1. This will give us the first rift explosion. I immediately casted my ultimate here because I thought it was enough to burst down Derov and remove him from the fight. You can continue with the bread and butter combo of skill 1 into skill 2 as long as you have sufficient energy. I am rotating to see if I can help my overextended teammates, but since Angela also dies here, I aborted my plan and went to sit in this bush instead to see if I can ambush Derov. Whoops, seems like I underestimated the enemy here. Remember to never get too cocky, even if you are ahead. Also, this is a reminder that Nolan is really squishy with this damage build. Remember that you can combo your retry with your ultimate to better secure lords and turtles.
Experience the void. I have become accustomed to the cold loneliness of the void.
Since I was coming from an angle that could engage Xbox without needing skill 2 to close the gap, I could start with enhanced basic attack into skill 1. I then followed up with skill 1 into skill 2, which creates another explosion, and then I used my ultimate to try and finish him off. But since he still did not die yet, I followed up with another skill 1 and 2, which finally killed off that tanky Xbox. Unfortunately, we did not have Claude for this push, so we couldn't push in further than we wanted to. I know Angela outed me, but I'm not so confident that I'll be able to tank 5 enemies even with her out. Seems like my teammates are gonna fight. I better rush there to help them. You can chain multiple skill 1s to create rifts for an explosion from range if you don't see an opportunity to die. And that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know in the comments if you like the style of this guide, since it's something that I'm experimenting with. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.